Ottawa is not a very military place, and Canada's not usually seen as a particularly warlike country. But it is a sovereign state, a member of the international system of sovereign states, so it fights wars. At various times, Canadian troops have killed Russians, Americans, Germans, Turks, Italians, Koreans, South Africans, and Japanese. And all those people got to kill Canadians, too, 100,000 of them in this century. This is a film about why people feel the need to keep armies and fight wars. We've made it in Israel because that's a country where the reasons why people fight wars and the costs of behaving that way are especially clear. Israel's only been an independent state for a short time, and the direct connection between statehood and the ability to fight wars is still visible there. But Israel is basically no different from Canada or Russia or Argentina or anywhere else. It's just a very good example of how we're all trying to get what we want, or at least make ourselves safe, through military power, and how none of us are succeeding. It's June 2nd, 1982, the end of a normal day in northern Israel. But for Nimrod Horovitz and his partner, the workday is just beginning. They'll spend the next 10 hours patrolling the boundaries of their kibbutz. They're searching for marauding thieves and the occasional wild boar that ravages their crops. They're also looking for Palestinian guerrillas, for Kibbutz Kfar Giladi sits on Israel's northern border, the border between Israel and Lebanon, the border between the Jews and their deadliest enemy, the Palestinians. If you want to know why it's been a good idea all through history to have a strong state with a good army, ask the Jews. They found out the hard way by losing theirs. This mountain's called Masada, and it was here about 1,900 years ago that the Roman army destroyed the last vestiges of Jewish independence. About 1,000 men, women, and children who were the last survivors of the great Jewish revolt against Roman rule were holding out in a wooden fortress on top of Masada. So 15,000 Roman soldiers built a great earthen ramp up the side of the mountain to get at them. When the Romans finally reached the top and set the fortress on fire, the Jewish defenders chose to die rather than surrender. Men were chosen by lot to kill all the others and then commit suicide themselves. Only 7 women and children who hid themselves in a water cistern were found alive by the Romans. And from that moment, there was no place in the world ruled by Jews for almost 19 centuries. By the early 20th century, there was a steady trickle of Jewish immigrants back to Palestine. But it was Hitler who provided the decisive push for the foundation of Israel. He proved, for anyone who doubted it, that in a world which runs on power, not on love, to be powerless is to be exposed to the most dreadful peril. It was the Jews of Europe who learned that lesson most bitterly of all. The language has a number of words for the Jewish experience as an exiled people without a state of their own. Ghetto, pogrom, Holocaust. So when the Zionists decided it was time to put an end to this ordeal, they knew what they had to do. They had to recreate a strong, independent Jewish state. And to get or keep a state the way this world has always worked, you need an army. You have to be able to fight wars.
Australia? Yes. Belgium? Yes.
On May the 1st, 1948, the United Nations voted for the partition of Palestine between Jews and Arabs, for the creation of the State of Israel. Or rather, the UN gave the Jews the legal right to create Israel. But the Arabs claimed the same land, and within hours, the infant State of Israel was at war. Israel had to establish its right to exist the same way as most other countries, by war. A war which ended with more than half of former Palestine under the control of the State of Israel, and much of its Arab population refugees. Getting the organized power of a state behind you may save you from being a victim, but it's very often at the cost of turning other people into victims instead.
A state in the world in which we live means that you are recognized by the world, you have got a legitimate rights to do within your own country whatever you want, no need to get permission to bring in all the Jewish refugees from all over the world, to have the means to achieve the vision of the Zionist movement in much better way than without having the status of independent country and people.
What you win by war, you must defend by further war. Now, in June 1982, there is no war, but Nimrod Horvitz, like all the men of his kibbutz, must take his turn patrolling its defenses.
Look, I born in 1948, and when I was half years old, they took us, all the kids, to Haifa, because it's a big war around. And now, we live here, and we don't take the children out. We have everything. We have the shelters, and we have security around in the kibbutz. And you see by yourself how we live here. It's wonderful here. Anyway, we like it.
In fact, the Israelis live much the same way everybody else does, in temporary peace, armed to the teeth against potential enemies, and under the permanent threat of war. Israel's wars come more often, but we all live in fortresses that we call states, and we all keep ourselves ready to fight the other states that fill the dangerous world beyond our borders. Kfar Giladi is in a particularly exposed part of Israel, where the border makes a great curve. It's almost surrounded by enemies. On the north by the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, whose guerrillas occupy southern Lebanon, and across the valley to the east by the Syrians who wait in tanks beyond the Golan Heights. Yet, despite its precarious position, Kfar Giladi is a very peaceful place this cloudless morning early in June. The 400 members of the kibbutz have bought that peace with their lives. 40 of Kfar Giladi's members have died in Israel's 6 wars. And now, with the PLO sitting just across the border, they're paying for their security with constant watchfulness. The kibbutz is surrounded by 10 guard towers and 5 miles of barbed wire. Ori Eshkoli is the manager of Kfar Giladi. Ori is now 39. On his 18th birthday, like all young Israelis, he went into the army. His first war came in 1967, the Six-Day War. Ori's unit was the first to fight its way inside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, which had remained under Arab control since 1948. It was the fierce